And we are back. Boxing with Mannix and Mora. I'm Chris Mannix. He is the former junior middleweight champion, Sergio Mora. On this episode, we are going to get into David Benavidez's win over David Morrell, a rejuvenating, reviving win for Stephen Fulton on the undercard of that fight, and the Claressa Shields heavyweight championship fight against Danielle Perkins. We're both at that this past weekend. Sergio, I will say the subject of this past weekend came up in my conversations with NBA people this week. I'm in Oklahoma City doing some work out here, and people were not asking me about David Benavidez. They were not asking me about Claressa Shields. They were asking if I was okay after two giant heavyweights came through the ring ropes and destroyed our announce table, which, that's boxing for you, right? I don't know. Have you been getting the same type of questions about
That's all
that
I've been
move?
getting. That's all I've been getting on the flight over here. I've been watching on social media. My friends, everyone's talking about that fight. That fight was probably one of the worst fights I've ever seen. It was sloppy. It was both guys didn't know how to really box. They were tired. It was an ugly fight. Then it ended in WWE fashion with excitement and a story to tell that everyone's talking about. Just goes to show you, man, people love a train wreck. No matter what it is, people love a train wreck. The fight sucked, but what happened afterwards, no one could stop talking about it.
It wasn't one of the worst fights I've ever seen. It was the worst fight I've ever seen. It was certainly the worst fight that I've ever seen on a televised undercard. We're talking about Brandon Moore against Skylar Lacey. Brandon Moore, one loss on his resume. Skylar Lacey undefeated coming into that fight, and it was like it wasn't even. You can't even call it a slobber knocker. Slobber knockers are at least fun. That was just a wrestling match from start to finish that ended with Moore winning by disqualification after Lacey, for like the 10th time, shoved him up against the ropes. He went through the ropes. Both those guys wound up on the table. Our announce table gets smashed. Shout out to Alina Birch, who got us a new table before the next
Mhm.
fight started. The very capable DAZN employee that helped us out with that. It was quite the scene there. And that, of course, was the big story. That made Awful Announcing, picked it up, and was all over social media. So wild scene in Flint, Michigan this past weekend. All right, before we get into any of the fights, I do want to address something that has been making the rounds on social media on Monday. And I'm not sure if you saw this. I didn't talk to you about this beforehand, but there have been reports that Canelo Alvarez is closing in on a deal to fight Jake Paul this
Oh
spring.
yeah,
Um,
I've seen it.
yeah, so what we've known up to this point is that Canelo has a agreement in principle to face Terrence Crawford in the fall. The targeted date is, I believe, September 13th, right around there. That would be for Canelo's 168-pound title. That's a fight that we expected to come to fruition. That these two guys have been talking about fighting each other for a while, especially Crawford. And it sounded like Canelo was on board with it. The Jake Paul stuff, though, kind of came out of nowhere. And my initial reaction, Sergio, was no way. This can't be true. Like, why would Canelo move up to whatever weight he's going to have to fight Jake Paul at in the spring or even the summer? We'll get into that. And then drop back down to 168 to fight uh, Terrence Crawford. But I've asked around. There's some legs to this. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself and say it's a done deal, but this is not just internet chatter that's out there. There's traction here for a fight between Canelo and Jake Paul. The one of the questions I have is like, look, if this was scheduled for May, I would say, all right, that makes some sense. But Jake Paul went on Twitter and said that he was going to fight in early July. There's no way Canelo fights Jake Paul in early July and turns around and fights Bud Crawford in September. That doesn't work. Doesn't happen.
Hmm.
So there's a lot I'm still unclear about, but I can tell you, Sergio, this is real. There's something to this Canelo Jake Paul stuff. So I'll give you the floor there to react to the most popular boxer this side of the Atlantic, potentially taking on Jake Paul, your old friend, in a some kind of matchup.
Well, look, I understand why Canelo wants to do it. It's easy money. it's a sparring session that he's going to make a lot of money, tens of millions of dollars, and he's going to be exposed to a whole new generation, and that's great for boxing. That's great for Canelo. That's great for Alvarez, the brand. Jake Paul, what can I say, man? Look, I've been shitting on Jake Paul for years now, and I've always told you he's a master promoter. I've always told you that he's hustling people for their money, their hard-earned money. He's not fighting boxers. All that's true. All that's true. But look, he had a vision and he's a mastermind when it comes to using his platform and his followers. And if this fight actually happens, checkmate or checkmate, he won. Jake Paul won. He won in boxing. He won in business. He won in haha, I told you so. And he's going to laugh all the way to the bank. And guess what? I'm going to have to applaud him myself because if this YouTube star, this Disney star, wherever the hell he came from, got all the way fighting nobodies, MMA guys and retired basketball players and football players and nobodies in the boxing ring, and finally gonna face a superstar and a pound for pound great in Canelo Alvarez, then I just need to shut up myself and applaud that man because it was a masterful move from being a nobody in boxing to being the absolute top dog making the most money. It's incredible. So I got to applaud him. I can't be a hater anymore against Jake Paul if this fight happens.
Yeah. Popularity in boxing has always trumped talent when it comes to fighters getting opportunities. But this would be next level. Now, I don't know how, it obviously wouldn't be for all of Canelo's belts at 168. There's no way Jake Paul can make 168 pounds. If it were to happen, one of these sanctioning bodies would come along and manufacture a cruiserweight title of some kind to put it on the line. But it would be a astonishing turn of events for Jake Paul to go from fighting Mike Tyson in the biggest boxing match in modern history, whatever you think about it, the eyeballs were massive, to facing Canelo Alvarez, once the pound for pound king, still the box office star in this sport. It would be wild. And look, I'm with you. This would pretty much cement that Canelo Alvarez is probably entering the final year maybe of his career. This is what someone said to me. Like, if he fights Jake Paul and then fights Terrence Crawford, that's probably going to be the end, because he'd collect a huge check to fight Jake in some kind of quasi exhibition. And then he gets Terrence Crawford in a hugely marketable fight in the US. Like, I don't know where you go from there. Like, there's no way to, you're not going to, you're not going to make anywhere near as much money to fight like a Dimitri Bivol. Like, there's just, it's just not there for him. So this could be, the final steps for Canelo Alvarez in his career to make a boatload of money and cash out. But I will just say, keep an eye on this situation. I don't think anything is finalized as of yet, but talking to people that are connected to it, it does sound like there's legs to this story. So we'll see what happens with this.
Well, I would look just to put a button on this. It's not a cash out. It's Canelo cashing in. That's easy money. It's easy money. It's going to be the easiest money any professional champion has ever made in that boxing ring. So I respect the hustle of Jake Paul, but he's going to have to pay for it. Canelo's going to whoop his ass. That money's not going to be free. So he's cashing in, cashing out with Crawford later in the year, hopefully.
Yeah. Well, look, theoretically, he could make more than $100 million for each fight. Honestly, he could, depending on the kind of deal he gets and pay-per-view sales, at least for the Crawford fight. I mean, it's a remarkable paycheck that Canelo could cash in 2025. All right, let's talk about some of the fights that we watched this past weekend. On Saturday, David Benavidez defeated David Morrell by unanimous decision. This was a widely anticipated 175-pound fight. No real titles on the line. Both these guys were interim champions, but that didn't matter. This was a tremendous fight on paper and turned out to be a really good fight in the ring. And look, Benavidez came in with an experience edge over Morrell, and to my eyes, that was a difference maker there. Benavidez was able to use the more than three times as much professional experience in terms of total fights, and really control most of the action. Won a unanimous decision on all three scorecards. What did you think of the performance by Benavidez against Morrell?
Well, first I got to applaud David Morrell. I mean, I didn't think he had that in him. I thought he was going to get stopped. A lot of people thought he was going to get stopped. He just didn't have the experience. A lot of these fighters, especially Cuban fighters, they're on the back foot boxing, and then when it comes down to fighting, that's when they get overwhelmed. Especially if you have less than a dozen fights, like Morrell. But man, I gotta tell you, this guy showed heart, he showed balls, he showed courage, he showed game plan, and he was able to stun and rock Benavidez here and there. He got the respect of Benavidez. Benavidez didn't come out of that fight unscathed. Benavidez the Mexican monster had a respect what that Cuban kid did, man. He even had to go over there and pay his respects, give him his belt back and shake his hand because, you got to give props to David Morrell. So I just want to get that out of the way. But yes, David Benavidez, man, what a performance. I mean, yes, he controlled the fight. He didn't quite dominate. That's a strong word. I don't think he dominated. He pressured Morrell. He fought like the experienced fighter. He fought like the champion, the bigger guy. But I wouldn't go as far as yeah, he controlled, like you said, but he didn't dominate. Morrell had his moments and he got the respect of the monster. So it was a tough fight, but I love the fact that Benavidez didn't stop going to the body. It was hard for Benavidez to get a clean shot on Morrell. That's why you saw him trying to paw the gloves away from his face and hit him around the guard. That's nothing new, man. That's a sneaky
I
tactic.
love that move. I love that move. You're right. It's not new. We've seen fighters do that in the past, but I love that move. And that's a veteran move, though. That's experience paying off for Benavidez.
You know why I learned that move from Fernando Vargas? Fernando Vargas loved doing that. Whenever he had guys that did that earmuff defense, like Winky Wright and Ike Cortez, he potted down and popped them around the guard. That's a legal move. So I love the fact that Benavidez was trying to find a way to really, punish Morrell, and he didn't punish him, man. It was a great performance by Benavidez, a top pound for pound performance, and he's a top dog at 168, 175 area. All right, so Bivol, Beterbiev, and then it's Benavidez, because this guy, he's the next future star. He's the next guy that we're gonna be. Once Canelo goes into the sunset, it's David Benavidez for the next 5 years at least that Mexicans are gonna be, supporting. I mean, this is a Mexican monster inside and outside the ring, a pay-per-view attraction, and he's willing to fight the best. That's the main thing about David Benavidez. You're already looking at his resume. It's already impressive, from Demetrius Andrade to Caleb Plant to Vosdick, and now this, man. I mean, you got to applaud that. So he welcomes all challengers, and that's what boxing fans want. He's going to be the next pay-per-view star for the next 5 years.
Yeah, this was the best win of Benavidez's career. Plant, Andrade, Bostic, I think Anthony Durrell's on his resume as well. Like
Durrell's a good one.
This was the best win of his career, I think, by far. This is in his prime, undefeated, light heavyweight contender. And you're right. Look, it was a tough fight, and it wasn't like, I thought that Benavidez dominated Andrade. Second half of the fight against Plant, he dominated that fight. This was a competitive fight throughout, but when that final bell rang, you had no doubt who had won a decision. That was, I think, in large part to the experience paying off of Benavidez. I mean, you think about the body work that he was investing in Morrell early in that fight. Like round after round, he's just digging downstairs to the body. He didn't get off to that slow start we're kind of used to seeing David Benavidez get off to in some of the fights. He just took the fight to Morrell. And look, we've never really seen Morrell have to fight off his back foot as often as he did. So Benavidez was smart. He put Morrell in uncomfortable positions. And as talented as Morrell is, it just didn't have enough experience as a pro, I think, to be able to match that output from Benavidez. Look, and talking to some people around Benavidez afterwards, like they were definitely nervous, especially in those later rounds. He picked up a knockdown. Morrell did in the 11th, kind of a little bit of a fake knockdown, not a real one. There was a little bit of a foot trip there, but he kept coming and he was throwing punches and he had pockets of success in this fight. So Benavidez had to work. He did. He dug deep. He won a clean victory, and he established himself, like you said, outside of that sphere of Bivol and Beterbiev, who are still 1-2 at light heavyweight. The next man up is clearly David Benavidez. And
absolutely,
look, whatever happens with this Beterbiev-Bivol fight, regardless of who wins, I want to see the winner go up against David Benavidez. And that's the other part of this that I like, Sergio, is that, like, Benavidez has spent the last couple of years frustrated by his inability to get a Canelo fight. Now you can see a pretty clear pathway for Benavidez to become a superstar without Canelo, because he takes this win, great visibility, great crowd in Las Vegas. Next up, maybe he gets the winner, a Beterbiev-Bivol. He's talked about fighting Zurdo Ramirez at cruiserweight. There's just a lot of good fights for him at 175 and above that can not only make him wealthier, but can build that profile to where he wants it to be. So this could not have gone better for David Benavidez, who I think took a huge step forward in his career on Saturday.
Yeah, he did, and yeah, you said it. He's carving his own lane, and he's becoming a star in the market that you want to become a star in, with the Latino market, that Mexican market. I mean, in the whole pay-per-view numbers, Mexicans buy the most pay-per-views. So you have this kid that's multi-raced, and he's willing to fight anybody at 168, 175, all the monsters included, and I mean, he has a hybrid of different styles. Yes, he has the aggression of a Mexican, but he has speed, he has power, he has IQ, he has toughness, inside fighting, outside fighting. You can't really just put him in one category. David Benavidez is a special fighter, and he's still evolving. I mean, he's still probably in his prime, or not, barely hitting his prime, to tell you the truth. I mean, it's a scary, scary position that people are going to be, opponents are going to be, when they have to fight David Benavidez at this point of his career, because the more popularity that he has, the more dangerous he's going to become, and more danger that the opponents are going to be in. I mean, just more confident as a champion, and evolving as a killer. I love it. I love it. We need new blood. We need new blood, and we need new superstars. And Benavidez is one of them.
I don't want to look past this great February 22nd fight, the rematch between Beterbiev and Bivol. But if Beterbiev wins this rematch, how do you see a matchup between Beterbiev and Bivol, or Beterbiev and Benavidez, two of the biggest punchers pound for pound in any weight class?
Well, look, I'm always gonna favor technique over power, and I'm gonna favor speed over power. But Beterbiev has technique and power. So I gotta favor him. I gotta favor the momentum. I gotta favor, the meanness. Both of them are mean, and that's another thing about Benavidez. You can't teach the chip on his shoulder, how mean he is, man. That's another thing that makes him special. There's fighters that are automatically gifted with their talent, with their attributes, but you can't teach meanness. That's something that you just picked up on the streets, or how you grew up. Benavidez has that. Beterbiev has that. That'll be I will favor Beterbiev in that fight. Even as a 40-year-old, I will still favor Beterbiev. I think Beterbiev is just a scary. If Benavidez is a Mexican monster, what's a bigger monster? What's an analogy for a bigger monster? King Kong? I don't know. Whatever. A Russian monster. That's Beterbiev, man. He's
Chechnyan boogeyman? I don't know.
Oh man, you got to do better than that, Mr. Ryder. I mean, this is
top
like
of my head.
This is like the Loch Ness monster / Sasquatch Russian beast bear. I don't know, whatever it is, man. But Beterbiev is that's a killer. But I will favor him over Benavidez.
I'd be fascinated to see who is the front foot fighter in that matchup, because Benavidez comes forward, Beterbiev comes forward. Like who is the front foot fighter there? Like who is the aggressor, and who's got to be the counterpuncher? Because both these guys just know pure violence coming forward. It would be such a good matchup. And look, it's realistic. It's very realistic. If Beterbiev beats Bivol on February 22nd, there is going to be a huge clamor for that fight. I know Benavidez said he wants to fight Beterbiev in the U.S. I would love to see that fight happen in Vegas. Turki Al-Sheikh is putting on U.S. shows in association with Ring Magazine, so maybe there is a little bit of wiggle room to have that fight in the U.S., but if it's in the U.S. or Saudi Arabia, that is an enormous fight for David Benavidez, and I'd love to see that happen before the end of the year. On the undercard, Sergio, we had Stephen Fulton picking up the biggest win of his career against a guy who he beat for the previous biggest win of his career. Brandon Figueroa, who Stephen Fulton beat a couple of years ago to become the unified champion at 122. This fight was at 126 pounds. The first fight between the two was ultra competitive, close decision win for Stephen Fulton. The rematch, not so much. And going to this fight, Sergio, I thought that Stephen Fulton, I thought he was going to get outclassed. I didn't like what I saw from Stephen Fulton in that close win over Carlos Castro. He comes out and puts on a boxing masterclass. He made Brandon Figueroa look average. A guy that was fighting toe-to-toe with him back a few years ago at 122 had nothing for Stephen Fulton in this rematch. Fulton wins a wide decision, becomes the champion, WBC champion, 126 pounds. What did you make of Fulton's performance last Saturday?
Well, you picked Figueroa, and I went with Fulton, and I mean he surprised me. I thought he was going to have his hands full again, but coming with a better strategy, stay off the ropes and use the jab, things that he did in this fight. But he was still fighting off the bigger fighter. He made Figueroa look sluggish, slow. He made him look like he was outclassed. And whenever you have that. Whenever you're familiar with your opponent, yeah, the second time around, you know what you did wrong the first time, and you're going to come with a better game plan. But man, he's been training with Bozy Ennis, right? And I think that pairing has been magical. I think he's had Ennis in the last fight too, but it takes time to build that chemistry. I hope they continue because if this is the Fulton that we're going to be seeing from here on forward, I mean that's a special talent because he didn't just run and outbox Figueroa. He outfought him in the inside. He got him on the sides. He was able to beat him down. He dominated that fight. That fight he dominated. I mean, Figueroa wasn't even close to being in that fight like he was the first time around. Fulton is a special talent, and when motivated by whoever's in his corner and motivated by whoever's in front of him, man, he's going to be hard to beat. I like what I saw with Fulton. Everything I saw with Fulton on the inside, outside, power, speed, and the fact that he followed strategy to the end. Complete performance.
That was a completely different fighter than the guy that we called fighting Carlos Castro. And look, both these guys had fights against Carlos Castro in the last couple of years. Figueroa blew Castro out. Fulton got knocked down in the fifth round and barely squeezed out a decision. So, look, maybe I was being a prisoner of the moment. And looking back at that Castro fight, thinking, look, after the Inoue knockout, after the Castro performance, maybe we've seen the best of Stephen Fulton. Maybe the best is behind him. I'm looking at Figueroa. I'm looking at this big, long frame. I'm saying if either one of these guys has a chance to look good at a higher weight class, it's probably going to be Brandon Figueroa. But whatever happened between the Castro fight and this fight against Figueroa, Stephen Fulton ate his Wheaties. Stephen Fulton had his Popeye spinach. Stephen Fulton had another great camp with Bozy Ennis. But that's a completely different guy, Sergio. And maybe there is something to this idea that, hey, Fulton was coming off a pretty long layoff when he faced Carlos Castro. Fulton didn't like being on the prelims of that Canelo card. Wasn't happy about his positioning there. Couldn't really get up for that particular type of fight after a huge event against Inoue. But it was just a very different fighter than the one I saw against Carlos Castro. And I don't know what you attribute that to. Like, is it just, you said right there, maybe another camp with Bozy Ennis, I guess that can play a part in it. But the energy that Fulton had and the ability to keep Figueroa from gaining any type of momentum, from getting any type of distance and getting those punches off, I mean, it was brilliant. That was a boxing masterclass from Stephen Fulton. And I don't know where that came from. I didn't see that one coming.
You have to credit Bozy Ennis. You have to credit also Fulton for kicking himself in the butt and having to make that decision and following a game plan. And the fact that, see, in his last fight, I don't really take too much on that. That's why when you're picking against Fulton and I want to go watch that fight, yeah, he looked bad. But look, whenever you're dealing with champions, you sometimes fight down to your opposition. You go from one of the best fighters in the planet in Inoue to, what's his name again?
Carlos Castro.
Castro, there you go. Yeah, it's forgettable. So Fulton was fighting down to his competition. So guys like that, champions like that are on the big stage, already world champions, they're gonna want to be that again. They want the juices flowing. They want that momentum. They want to be a little bit scared, a little bit nervous. They want to train extra hard. And when you have a new voice in your corner that's teaching you new things, giving you different angles, you get motivated by that. You want to learn that. You want to impress them. So it was a little bit of a lot of moving parts. But see, the moving parts was because of what Fulton wanted to do. It was his decision. And because of that, we got to give him all the credit in the world because he's going in the right direction and he shined.
Yeah, I don't know what happened to the Figueroa that we saw blitz Castro, beat up Mark Magsayo, beat Jesse Magdaleno. Like, the momentum was clearly on the side of Figueroa, and he was just dominant from start to finish. Now, if you're Stephen Fulton, like, you're arguably the top guy at 126 now. This is not a division that has many, if any, big names. In the UK, Nick Ball's got a belt at 126. Rafael Espinoza still at 126. We'll see what he does in his next fight. Angelo Leo is out there as well. There are makeable fights for Stephen Fulton. And Stephen Fulton he already went overseas to fight Inoue. You could potentially see a situation where he goes over to Saudi Arabia and fights Nick Ball for the Unified Championship 126. That's a fun fight. That's a clash of styles. Nick Ball comes straight ahead. Fulton's boxing versus Ball's pressure. Would love to see that fight. But look, after getting knocked out badly by Inoue, Fulton might be like 2 wins away at 126 from being the guy that Inoue would have to go through if he wants to win all the belts at this new weight class. So it's really an incredible revival for Fulton. Even though he's only got that one loss on his resume, I just I'll admit it, I kind of left him for dead after the loss to Inoue and that Castro defeat.
You almost left them for dead, Chris Mannix. I did. I knew there was something to salvage there. Now Stephen Fulton is completely reinvigorated, assimilated, and finally going to be relocated if he fights in Saudi Arabia. That's Al Pacino I'm imitating, by the way.
It's not a very good Al Pacino accent. In fact, it's a really bad Al Pacino accent.
I'm reloaded. Come on. Next question.
All right, let's finish with the fight that we called on Sunday. Claressa Shields becoming the undisputed women's heavyweight champion with a lopsided decision win over number 1 contender Danielle Perkins. Shields becomes the first fighter, male or female, to go undisputed in 3 different weight classes. This was a fight that was not close at all. Perkins was a much bigger woman in the ring, had a couple of moments throughout this fight, showcases some of that power with the straight left hand, but Shields was once again dominated and punctuated this win with a picture-perfect right hand that dropped Danielle Perkins with about 10 seconds to go in the final round of this fight. Your thoughts on the GWOAT's performance on Sunday?
I was going back and forth today with my trainer, Dean Campos, and Dean Campos was like, man, you were overpraising Claressa Shields. Of course, he's always hating. Man, she was doing this wrong. She was doing that wrong. He was only picking out the negatives. I'm like, my job is to pick out the positives, man. It's not to pick out the negatives. Yes, in every performance, you could pick out negatives, man. Just the way boxing's not a perfect game. But what Claressa Shields did, in my opinion, and I was in front of this fight, and I saw how big Perkins was, how strong she was. Yeah, she only had 5 fights. If you look at that and the fighters that she's faced, it was a terrible resume. But I'm just looking at the size of this woman, the athleticism, the fact that they knew each other, the fact that I like the way she was handling herself. And she was a big southpaw. Claressa Shields hadn't fought a southpaw in like 4 years. So there was little intangibles there that made it interesting. And then finally, when they were in front of each other, Perkins was throwing the right shots, but just Shields was way too sharp, way too fast, way too sharp, way too motivated. That Flint crowd was behind her the entire way. Not one boo bird in that audience. So I don't care if it's my trainer, the biggest Claressa Shields hater, or whoever it is. Claressa Shields had a GOAT performance, a pound for pound type performance, and she did it on the big stage, man, in front of her crowd. That's a star. She checked all the boxes of what you need to do to continue climbing in the right direction. Shields did that against a big, undefeated opponent, only a handful of fights, undefeated, for another championship at heavyweight. I mean, it really is incredible, man. What she's doing from 154 to 160, 68, all the way to the heavyweight. Yeah, man, you got to applaud greatness when you see it, and we're witnessing it.
Look, did Danielle Perkins deserve to be fighting for the undisputed heavyweight championship? Of course not, right? Like, she is. You don't get to fight for a title, much less all 4 titles, with just 5 professional fights. She is a 42-year-old former basketball player who, didn't get into boxing until she was older than Shields is right now. So we acknowledge the flaws in Danielle Perkins and the flaws in all fighters in these heavier weight classes. We talked about this a lot, before the fight started. Like, the talent in women's boxing is clustered at 147 pounds and lower. It's just a reality, right? Katie Taylor, Amanda Serrano, Michaela Mayer. You go down the pound for pound list, and the vast majority of them, all of them, are 147 pounds and under, except for Claressa Shields. There's nothing Claressa can do about that. She's not avoiding anybody at 154 or 160 or 168 or 175 or heavyweight. She's not avoiding any of them. She's fighting who's in front of her. So we don't look at this fight saying, hey, well, she should have faced that girl. Like, she should have faced Hannah Gabriels in a rematch of their fight. She should have faced any of the other handful of heavyweights that are currently ranked right now. It is what it is. The question now becomes, what is the challenge for Claressa Shields? Because she has quite literally cleaned out every weight class that she possibly can. Like, she's been undisputed in 3 of them. She was unified at 168. I don't see anyone out there in these heavier weight classes, Sergio, that can give her a fight. Like, I know that Dimitri Salita, her promoter, really wants to put together a third fight with Savannah Marshall. And there is some marketability to that. Savannah Marshall is still the only woman that has handed Claressa a defeat, did that in the amateur ranks. She lost to Claressa in 2022, but there were some competitive moments in that fight. Certainly the most competitive fight that Claressa's ever had. So I can see the advantage to that. But you look at some of the names Claressa threw out there. Franchon Cruz-Dezurn, who's a title holder at 168. They fought in their pro debuts years ago. Hannah Gabriels, who has a knockdown against Claressa Shields early in her career. Do these fights move the needle for you? Are these the kind of fights you want to see Claressa Shields in next?
The thing about women's boxing, and I don't care if you're talking about Amanda Serrano or Katie Taylor or whoever it is, the top female fighters, they've recycled opponents. They've had rematches, sometimes trilogies with opponents they face, because there's not a lot of women to pick from. So it's either be inactive and wait for a new name around the block, or stay active against a girl that you could probably try to knock out the next time around. Katie Taylor faced Serrano twice. It looks like it's going to be a trilogy. Faced Chantel Cameron twice. Faced Delphine Persoon twice. If you look at Amanda Serrano, she fought a girl that 4 times. I think her name was like Eva something. 4 times. Amanda Serrano has a bunch of rematches. Every big name in women's boxing has faced the same fighter at least more than twice. It guaranteed, because they have to continue, staying busy. It's just the way it is. So I wouldn't mind that Savannah Marshall fight, but you got to throw a little twist in it. Don't fight at 175. Fight a little, like at 168. The fact that Marshall already beat Franchon Cruz for the title, she's a champion. She has like 3 belts around her waist. Bring that fight to the States. Claressa Shields proved that she is a ticket seller. I mean, it doesn't have to be Flint, Michigan. It could be around that Midwest area, but she sells, and she's exciting. And in the higher weight division, and she believes in her power, that knockdown brought the roof down, and it was incredible. So she's still getting better. I want the Savannah Marshall rematch. You're asking me, that's what I want. I think Marshall at 168 will be difficult.
Well, I think if that fight happens, it'll be at heavyweight. And Savannah Marshall has said that she wants that fight at heavyweight. It sounds like Savannah Marshall will be back in a boxing ring in March. If she gets through whatever fight she's going to be on in March, they should try hard to make that fight between Claressa and Savannah in Detroit. Like, Claressa makes the point that she went to London to fight Savannah Marshall. Savannah should have to come to Detroit to fight Claressa Shields. It's a big event. It's a marketable fight for all the belts at heavyweight. I do like that fight. If that fight can't be made, and I think there's certainly some question marks there, Sergio. Savannah has talked about fighting Claressa, but she's talked about doing it in the PFL cage. Like, she isn't talking about doing it.
No.
I don't look. I agree with you.
No.
But if that fight doesn't come together, I don't really need to see a Hannah Gabriels rematch. With all due respect to Franchon Cruz-Dezurn, I don't need to see that fight again, at least not right now. The fight I need to see, Sergio, is Claressa against Michaela Mayer. Because if you're looking for a marketable fight, an event in women's boxing, it's a fight between these 2 friends, 2016 Olympic teammates, that at one point would have seemed like a fantasy fight. I mean, Michaela began her career and spent most of it fighting at 130 pounds, while Claressa was at 54 and 60. Since then, Michaela's come all the way up to 147, and she's made it clear she can go up to 54 and fight for a world title at that weight class. She's got a lot of height on her, so she can fill out that frame. A fight between Claressa and Michaela at 54 is just a big event. Michaela doesn't sell tickets in the same way that Claressa sold some tickets, but Michaela's been fighting on ESPN for like 5 years now. She's built something of a following. She's built a name for herself. Her last fight against Sandy Ryan did close to 1 million viewers on ESPN. It was a great event. This fight, a rematch against Sandy Ryan, main event in Las Vegas, end of March. Like, you're kind of reaching that critical point where it's like, all right, well, what are you waiting for? Like if Claressa can make 154, she says she can. This is her word. She says I can make 54. Michaela, if she wants to go up to 54, that makes a lot of sense. I think there'd be some spiciness to the press tours. I think they are
Yeah,
friends, but I do think there might be a little bit of friction somewhere between the two, a natural competitiveness, competitive rivalry between these two women. That's an event, Sergio. That's an event between two top tier women in the U.S. And if you have an opportunity to do that, you got to jump on it, in my opinion.
I agree, and it's very promotable. Not only that they're both U.S. Olympians, both of them are champions, both of them have like a chip on their shoulder. They have a little attitude. So yes, the press conference would be great, but they have two different demographics. I mean, you got an African American woman and a white woman. It's always telling when you got that a Mexican, a black, or whatever it is, because you bring in different eyeballs from different cultures, from different parts of the country or different parts of the world, or whatever it is. But the fact that they're both American, they both represented our great country, that right there is a promotion, man. That's a promoter's dream. And Michaela Mayer is a tall, very tall, wide shoulder fighter. She can actually distribute that weight without being, without being fat or without being out of shape. She's a big woman, so I think she can move up and look good. I think Claressa Shields might be coming down. If anyone's going to get affected, it's going to be Claressa Shields having to come down, because whenever you go up in weight and try to put on that muscle, to lose that muscle, that's going to be a little bit more detrimental to your physique and your legs and your cardio and all that. So Mayer has that with her. She's going to move up in weight. It's going to benefit her, and the money involved. They're both going to probably make career high paydays, and it's going to be all eyeballs on them. And it's probably going to be just as big as Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano in New York as far as popularity. We'll see if they get the eyeballs.
It's a big fight. It probably represents close to a 7-figure payday for both.
That'll be a 7-figure payday.
I think for Claressa, it would be. I mean, Michaela probably hasn't come close to that type of number. And Claressa is, I think, the bigger draw at this point. It's proven to be anyway in the Midwest. But it's a career high payday for Michaela. It's probably a career high payday for Claressa. It's just a huge event, and I think you got to go for it. By the way, I'm going to have Adam, our producer, just cut out. What did you say there? She's a big woman. I'm going to cut out that clip and just replay that over and over and over again. That's what I want. Just have that.
Hey, I'm a skinny, scrawny man. Whatever. Play that over and over. The case still kicks some ass, though.